with a song. Now, 58 ships were built in the King's Yard, 58 ships for the Royal Navy. Ships great and small, with their masts standing tall, the Harwich ships sailed all the world's 7 seas. The shipwrights of Harwich were known the world over, the shipwrights of Harwich were men of renown. So Anthony Dean for the Royal Navy established a shipyard in old Harwich town. This is your bit. 58 ships were built in the King's Yard, 58 ships for the Royal Navy. Ships great and small, with their masts standing tall, the Harwich ships sailed all the world's 7 seas. First to the sea in 1660 was HMS Harwich, a sprit-sail-rigged boy. 62 guns, 62 tons and a sprinkling of guns for carrying cargo and laying of boys. 58 ships were built in the King's Yard, 58 ships for the Royal Navy. Ships great and small, with their masts standing tall, the Harwich ships sailed all the world's 7 seas. So you've heard verses 1 and 2. This is verse question mark. I will explain. When I replaced wood, the old shipwrights retired. The crane was moved to a place on the green. The King's Yard is gone, but the memories live on in the names of the ships at Sir Anthony Dean. 58 ships were launched in the King's Yard, 58 ships for the Royal Navy. Ships great and tall, with their masts standing tall, the Harwich ships sailed all the world's 7 seas. The Harwich ships sailed all the world's 7 seas. Put that down there where I can't break it. Okay, so for those of you that don't know us, I am Mick Verrier, Chairman of Harwich International Shanty Festival, for my sins. And my colleague here is Richard Oxborrough of the Harwich Society. I don't know what sins you committed for that.
Just failing to stand back quickly enough.
Yeah. And other various historical interests around the town. And to my left, masquerading as a cameraman, Paul Turvey. And the three of us at the moment, along with Pam Fitzgerald and 1 or 2 other people, constitute 58 ships. So let's explain a bit about what that's about. 58 ships was born out of a desire to get away from Christopher Jones and the Mayflower. As a town and as a festival and as many other organisations, I think, we have been somewhat obsessed for a while with Christopher Jones and the Mayflower, and we felt that we had reached the point where we needed to look again. And up by the Navy Yard is a board commemorating the names of the supposedly 58 ships that were built there for the Royal Navy when it was the King's Yard. And we thought, that looks interesting, we should find out more about all of their stories. we knew that the Shanty Festival, when we came up with this at the meeting, we knew straight away this was not just a Shanty Festival project. So we went initially to the Harwich Society and to Harwich Museum and said, got this idea, what do you think? And it's fair to say everyone's been very keen. So it's a collaborative project between the Harwich International Shanty Festival, the Harwich Society, Harwich Museum, experienced researchers, and I know there are some in this room. But one of the underpinning things for us is we want to bring in new researchers. Okay, we want people, especially young people, but not only young people, we want people who have not been engaged in historical research to be engaged in it. Okay? For that reason, we also want it to be creative. Now, I am a creative person. I have, in my past, gone to academic conferences and delivered papers to rooms full of academics. In my experience, that's very interesting for the academics. Doesn't do a lot to engage the general population. And creative research, which is, some of you may be familiar with the concept of practice as research, which is very favoured in universities at the moment. Creative research is a thing. You find out more about a subject in order to create something like a song, which is what I do, fundamentally. But there's no limit to the potential outcomes, whether they're creative or otherwise. We do not see this project as being limited by anything other than by people's own imaginations. So if you get involved with us and the upshot of your project is that you do want to present an academic paper to a room full of academics, that's great, do that. If, on the other hand, you want to write some more of a song or a new song or paint a picture or write a poem, someone's already done that, of which more later. Any of those things, visual art, 3D, 2D art, I don't mind, animated art, anything. In fact, the more you try and explain what the project might be, the more you just go down a rabbit warren. There is no limit to the potential outcomes. And there's no real limit to the project, but what we do want to do is to be back here a year from now with another event made up of creative outcomes from the project. That won't be the end of the project, it will be an example of the progress of the project. That's the plan. I keep looking at these two guys just in case I'm saying something which doesn't represent everyone's views, in which case you can say, hang on a minute, that's not what we agreed. It's a history project. Okay, fundamentally it's a history project. And it's maritime history because it's about ships and the places that built ships. But it's also a local project because it's about the ships that were built here. Okay, it becomes social history once you start talking about the people who were on those ships. We will do a bit of that in a little while. It becomes social history. All sorts of avenues you could go down there. And it's ongoing. Okay, it starts today. Various things will happen after today. Some of them may already have happened in terms of our Facebook presence and things like that that we've been kind of holding to get this underway. It's an ongoing project, and I've put there this line, a potentially huge project with endless opportunities for spin-off research, which sounds like it might be a line for inclusion in a funding application. Because we might have to do that. Next year's event will not be the end. Next year's event will be, hopefully, a sign of where we're going. Okay, so that's what we want to do, I think. The other day when we ran this as a trial, I was told that perhaps there was a bit too much in the way of words on that slide and some of the words were too small, but can you all read them at the back? Yes. So you all know what you're letting yourselves in for. We would like you all to join us and become part of the story. Okay, so this bit will become, from here on it'll be a bit more interactive. HMS Harwich, if you go and look at the board, the very first ship that came out of the yard, according to the board, was an HMS Harwich in 1660. Okay, so I'll tell you just a couple of interesting things about that. It's the second verse of my song. HMS Harwich was a hoy. I don't know what a hoy was, or I didn't, so I looked it up. Now, it turns out hoys were lightly or unarmed vessels used by the old 17th century Navy fundamentally to set goods from one place to another, transport people, and occasionally laying marks and things. And seemingly in design, they were very similar to what we know as the Thames barge. And I think Richard might have some more to say about that in due course. So what we know of HMS Harwich in 1660, she was about 60 tons, 62 tons, had I think 5 guns, and wasn't around very long. How do we know she wasn't around very long? Well, because they launched another one in 1674. Okay, the 1674 version, found out a little bit about that. Anyone that saw our Facebook post a week or so back will have seen that at one point the second lieutenant of the 1674 HMS Harwich was Sir Cloudsley Shovel, Admiral of the fleet Sir Cloudsley Shovel, whose fleet was wrecked off the Scilly Isles. So there's a story, and that's the point. There's stories that the 58 ships will generate. Endless stories. Do you want to say any more about either of these HMS Harwiches?
No.
Would you like to say something about the 1754 one?
No.
Okay. We have got a poem written for us about the 1754 one. What we haven't got is a willing volunteer to read a poem. I might read it to you later on. When I get beyond my little bit of this, I might go and brush up my reading of the poem and have a go. Now, there may have been more HMS Harwiches. There seems to be possibly one or two more that aren't on that board, and certainly there was one that was never finished. Okay? So that's HMS Harwich, and now we get into Richard's potted histories. That's all you now.
Oh, great. HMS Harwich isn't in there, actually. So I sort of had this idea that if every lunchtime, I kind of spent an hour while I was eating my sandwich researching a ship, and I didn't get very far, but what I kind of did was stuck a pin in my list. So the first thing we did was we made a list, which is an Excel spreadsheet, quite boring. But we did find that for every ship there is either a Wikipedia entry or a 3DEX entry. So 3DEX is a kind of resource on sailing ships. So it was actually not a challenge to go and chase down, using secondary sources. Obviously, I'm not delving into the archive at that point. It was quite easy to go and chase down some ships. I'm actually going to go back a bit now and talk about the 58 ships. It's quite a convenient number because it fits nicely on a board. And to be honest with you, there were more ships at Harwich, but don't tell anybody. There's more ships built at Harwich than that. So really, what that board is about is the Royal Naval Yard. So that's the point at which, in 1664, a lease is taken out by the Crown on the bit of land that we know now as the Navy Yard, until really they stopped building naval ships there. And a lot of people have very simplified histories of what happened at the Navy Yard, but actually it was exactly what we always say about Harwich. Harwich always does well in times of war. So what you'd find, there'd be a war and it'd be really busy, and then we'd stop being at war and it would actually be shut down in some cases or mothballed, and there'd be no activity. So when you look at the list of ships, you'll see it's quite lumpy. And we'll talk about Dean as well. Christopher Dean, Anthony Dean, the master of the shipyard under Samuel Pepys, but actually he was only there for a very short amount of time because basically the Anglo-Dutch War finished and the shipyard got mothballed, so he moved to Portsmouth. So his kind of later work is quite well known, but that was actually done in Portsmouth. So there's a little example of how kind of history takes you off on little tangents. Let's just go through my lunchtime ships then. So I picked Hms Restoration. She was launched at the Harwich Navy Yard on the 25th of May 1678. She was a 1,055 ton, 70 gun, third-rate ship of the line. So third-rate ship of the line shows you that even something that's that big is a bit down the pecking order. And she spent 10 years in reserve. So she's built, she's launched, and then they did nothing with her. And that's fairly typical of ships, actually. They go into reserve because there's nothing for them to do. It was very exciting. You built loads of ships, and then it got quiet again, so you put them basically in reserve. But she was eventually commissioned for the War of the English Succession in 1690. So she spent quite a long time just sitting around, and then off she went and saw some action. Then the 9 Years' War, where she was in the Battle of Beachy Head and the Battle of Barfleur. And then she went for a refit at Portsmouth from 1699 to 1702. And she was lost in November 1703 with all hands. So she went down with all hands, which is, you know, one of those great tragedies that sometimes happens off the coast. And the wreck of Restoration is thought to be in the Goodwin Sands. So you know, probably know what the Goodwin Sands is, really off the coast of Kent. And there's a feature called the North Mound, which is a kind of lump in the sandbank, and they think that that is actually the Restoration. And it was designated a protected wreck in 1981. And what happens is the sands move around quite a lot. And when the sands move around, you sometimes see guns and things coming out. So I think that's a kind of watch this space. I think that more on that will be revealed. There's also a South Mound, which is another ship that sunk as well. So, you know, it's one of those things where that's sometimes the ship ends up on the seabed. In this case, with all the crew. The next ship I did was Hms Orpheus, and she was a 708 ton, 32 gun, fifth rate ship of the line, so a bit smaller, and she was launched in 1773. She was built under the Emergency Figure Building Programme, which I thought was a wonderful name, even in those days, and was a threat, of course, to war. So, you know, war comes, suddenly you start building ships. And she was, so that threat of war was actually the only ship of the Falkland Islands. So even in 1773, we were this time fighting the Spanish for what was going to happen to the Falklands. She actually saw action in the American Revolutionary War, sailing over to Cape May in 1776, and she was actually abandoned and burned to avoid capture off Rhode Island in 1778. So another Harry ship lying on the seabed, but this time over in America. Fearless. Fearless is great because if you look at the list at the Navy Yard, you'll see that there's two. And despite my extensive research for the last few weeks, can't quite find out what happened to the first one, but she definitely sunk, probably on her way to be fitted out. So launched, sunk, and then the Navy Yard built a brand new one in just 4 months. So I suspect there's a bit of egg on face there. The second one was virtually the same as the first one, but just slightly different. So that just goes to show that maybe the design was tweaked a bit, or she was fitted out slightly differently. So a 149 ton gun brig. She carried 10 18-pounders and 2 18-pounder chasers. So you've got carriage guns which are going to fire a broadside, but then you've got chasers. So if you're pursuing somebody, you can fire off the bow. And she saw action in the Napoleonic Wars. First in Denmark. Who knew that Denmark were involved in the Napoleonic Wars? It came as a bit of a surprise, all the action that was actually sort of taking place up in Denmark. Captain John Williams was wounded in that action, and later she was actually wrecked in the Mediterranean, but this time without loss of life. So she lies just off the coast, Cape San Sebastian, near Cadiz. Right, we're nearly there, don't worry. I'm going to skip now, right to the end, and I'm going to do my favourite ship, which was Fanfan. Hms Fanfan. There's only ever been one Hms Fanfan. Now, when I started researching Hms Fanfan, what I found was that there were stories in the newspapers about Dutch picaroons. Now, they're not biscuits. They are agile Dutch pirates who used to chase boats as they came out of Harwich and went across to the Low Countries, or vice versa, so on their way back in. And apparently there was a great need to have fast boats to chase the Dutch piccaroons. However, Fanfan was almost certainly a yacht built for Prince Rupert, who wanted a fast boat for his own purposes of sailing quickly. And Fanfan is named after his lady friend's canine companion. So perhaps it's obvious that, that there was only one HMS Fanfan. There was also, he actually built a pair of yachts, or a pair of yachts were built, and the second one I believe was called Fly. So maybe we might come to that later.
Just to interject there, many of you will be familiar with Prince Rupert historically as the leader of the cavalry for Charles I. Apparently he was very good at that. Charles I then promoted him to be commander of all the armies, and he wasn't quite so good at strategy as he was at leading the cavalry. And they fell out and he went off in a huff. But after the Restoration, Prince Rupert came back and he became Admiral of all England. Hence his ability to get the Navy to build him a yacht.
To build him, yes. Yeah. And another one just in case. So actually Fanfan was a yacht, but she actually did see some action. And the one that really caught my eye was an adventure that became known as Sir Rupert Holmes' Bonfire, which was obviously one of those scuttling operations where they moved in and burnt some ships. But unfortunately, Fanfan had a rather inglorious end. She became a pitch boat at a yard in Scotland. A pitch boat is basically a boat that's got a big pitch boiler on the back, and you boil up the tar and you go and kind of caulk and paint it onto things. So poor old Rupert's yacht. Shall I do one more? Or do you think that's enough theory? Should we do HMS Venger? Because she's quite a good one. She was built in 1754, and her and Scarborough, so HMS Scarborough, were the largest ships ever built at the Navy Yard. Let me see what her tonnage was. And I didn't make a note of her tonnage, is it? It's 1754 tonnes, sorry. I've got the dates and the tonnes muddled up. So she was 1754 tonnes, and she was actually launched in 1810. So there's an example of how ships are getting bigger. So you start off, and as the technology improves and the shipbuilding techniques get better, and the Navy Yard's really coming towards the end of its life in 1810, the ships are quite large. There was actually a class of ships called the Venger class. So Venger was the first of a class, and as I say, sailed down the slip 19th of June 1810. She saw no direct action, as far as I can find out, and she was fitted out as a receiving ship, which is essentially a training ship. And she spent the rest of her life in Sheerness before being broken up in 1843. So quite a variety of different naval careers they had by all the ships. Some of them saw action, some of them were damaged, wrecked, and a lot of them just sat around and were broken up at the end of their life.
Right, which brings us to this little story. You may have gathered by now that as fascinated as I am by the 58 ships, I'm possibly more fascinated by the people who rid them. So, HMS Irresistible and the infamous Captain Bligh. You've all heard of Captain Bligh. Actually, when you've all heard of Captain Bligh, you think of him as Captain Bligh. He was Lieutenant Bligh. And he was given an impossible job. He was sent in a very small ship called the Bounty to sail around the world to transport breadfruit trees from Tahiti to the West Indies. That's a complete story in itself. This all went horribly wrong, as you know, and he ended up cast adrift in an open boat with some of his crew, and then sailed 3,900 miles in an open boat, charting islands along the way. If he came across an island that he knew hadn't been charted, he made them row/sail round said island so he could chart it. I've seen his notebook. I bet they loved him for that. his 3,900 miles probably wouldn't have been quite as far if he wasn't so conscious of doing his job. What people don't necessarily know is that after this, he was exonerated of blame for the mutiny, and they gave him, in fact, two ships, a larger ship and another ship, HMS Providence, and I think the other one was called HMS Assistant, which tells you what it was there for, and sent him back to do the job. So he went back to Tahiti and actually did the job he'd been sent to do. And after that, he became a full captain, and he had command of a ship at the Battle of Copenhagen under then Rear Admiral Nelson. Okay, the action in which the admiral in charge, Hyde Parker from Melford Hall, famously said withdraw, and Nelson decided not to see it. Okay, Bligh must have done well at that. Nelson was impressed, and it would appear that Bligh's reward was HMS Irresistible, which had been built here about 20 years before, which was a much bigger ship, 74 guns instead of 54. So there's a little bit of what I call spin-off history and a direct involvement of somebody we know from history in our 58 ships story. Then, of course, we know it all went a bit downhill for Bligh in that he got promoted again. He reached the top of the captain's list, became an admiral, was sent to New South Wales to deal with problems that had already arisen in New South Wales, where he was patently unfit for the task of diplomacy. And there was a mutiny there which kind of tarnished his reputation, and that made everyone remember what had happened the first time. Okay. So we're reaching the point where we need to talk to you about what we want you to do. We would like lots of people to sign up to the project. By signing up, what we have in mind is to have a website where you can choose a ship and say, I'm interested in this ship, or this name, or whatever, and I will take responsibility for doing some research on that ship, and I will see where that leads me, and then I will create something. Now, the something could be a presentation, or it could be a work of art, or it could be just about anything. And then in the short term, what we're looking for between now and next year is for people to submit some of that to us so that we can craft it into an event to happen here next year. Just to get this kicked off, the song I started with, which I'm calling the Ballad of the King's Yard, I'm unleashing that to you now as the start of a community songwriting project. So you're all going to get a worksheet in a minute. I used to be a teacher, can you tell? So the idea is, when you get your worksheet, you will actually see two things. Firstly, you have a grid with all the ships on. Okay. So you can have a look and maybe make a few notes about this. On the back, you have the lyrics of the song, as more or less as I sang it, with a little bit of help. The light's not great in here, but when the light comes on, you will be able to see that some of them, there's some underlining. And fundamentally what I would like you to do, and not now obviously, but is to pick a ship, do your research, and then if you're not immediately driven to some creative thing or whatever, write a verse. Use my rhyme scheme. Write a verse. You send it to me at an address that will be eventually made public, and I will then collate these together and we'll have a longer song next year, which means that the bit we sang as a chorus today will probably just become verse 1, and we won't sing it after every verse, because otherwise it'll be a really, really long song. We don't want that. So that's our bit of creativity. The worksheets are coming amongst you. There's no penalty if you don't do your homework. Okay, I won't be standing here next year handing out detentions. I used to hate doing that anyway. But it would be nice to do. Would you like to hear this poem that we've written? I did look it up. I'll just read you this, and then I'll briefly try and explain what I've put on there. Oh, now, why are you doing that? Technology. Who was it wrote this?
It's my friend Simon Harvey.
Simon Harvey. Was there a particular reason he did this?
Well, it was an experiment. I thought,
Okay.
we've got to try and see if this is possible. So I said, have a go at this.
And
so
he
he
did.
just picked a ship and wrote a poem about it.
Okay. I saw her keel laid in the dry dock at Harwich in the warm August of 1742, and I saw her launched near to the frozen Christmas of 1743. She looked as fine as any vessel of the King's Royal Navy. More fine still, as soon I should be joining her company. She was tethered alongside for fitting out, and I watched daily the work of men on the tread-wheel crane. Slowly, slowly she came together. At last, my posting. I was a rating on a fourth-rate ship of the line with 50 fine cannon, a lady of her time. She carried the flag of King George's navy across all His Majesty's seas and did His Majesty's bidding, whatever that might be. Admiral Boscawen made us fools at Pondicherry in the Indies, and Captain Adams died on deck, one lost of only two, until the siege was lifted, and the coming of the monsoon we left a ragged crew. Now have passed these 10 years, and I am master under my captain Henry Marsh, and we are at Senegal up against the French. We have the Isle of Gorée and the Fort St. Louis, where the slaves in rough iron are corralled for Guadeloupe. So now we have their men of war, now we have their traders. We dine upon their finest food, and we send their gum, Arabic, home to the weavers of silk, with not a man of ours killed. King Louis has surrendered his slaves and his women to our noble King George. Tonight, as we pass to the south of Cuba, a storm is expected. Though we have weathered many, the log for the 4th of October 1760 will read of able seamen doing their jobs with skill. I shall take the helm myself.
That's of course where she was lost. So it's an ironic end.
Yeah. That was the Ballad of HMS Harwich by Simon Hart.
It was indeed.
A direct response to our little project here. Okay. Can I have some house lights, please? Okay, here's a slide. It's a little tale. Collaborative projects. I prepared this PowerPoint presentation. I submitted it to my two colleagues, and I said the penultimate slide needs some populating. Like with who to contact. A Facebook page, there is one. A Twitter page. The address of 3 decks. I could remember that bit. Couldn't remember. .org, yeah. And any other good resources. And their part of the collaboration is that they haven't done it. So, apologies for that. You have done it, but it's on the wrong computer.
Yes, and you gave me 48 hours
Yeah,
notice.
don't tell them
in
that.
Shanty week.
Anyway,
So how'd you get on?
we promise that all this information will be made public to you. Okay. I could say a little bit more about the songwriting project, but before we get to that stage, do you want to say something?
Yes, about the contacts. Right, although, yes, the information's not here, because I did edit this slide and I forgot to send it back. I built a website to support the project, On that website is a link to the Twitter, a link to the Facebook, and a contact us page. So, yeah, can't, well, I can read all that information out, but the best way to get us is 58ships.org.uk. 58ships.org.uk. And from there, all of the rest of the contact information is available. If you are on social media, then the common tag is at 58ships. That works on Facebook, that works on Twitter, it will work on Instagram just as soon as that has been done. At 58ships. I had no desire to make anything long-winded and complicated.
No.
No, that's Mick's department.
What's my part?
Long-winded and complicated.
Oh, thank you.
Richard.
I'm going to read you a from Samuel Pepys' diary. I like those. So Tuesday, the 2nd of April, 1667. Up and to the office. We're all morning sitting, and much trouble, but little business done for want of money, which makes me mighty melancholy. At noon, home to dinner, and Mr. Dean with me, who hath promised me a very fine draught of the Rupert, which he will make purposely for me with great perfection, which I will make one of the beautifullest things that was ever seen of the kind in the world, she being a ship that will deserve it. Then to the office, where all afternoon very busy, and in the evening weary home, and there to sing, but vexed with the unreadiness of the girl's voice to learn the latter part of my song, though I confess it is very hard, half notes, so to supper and to bed. So there's a bit of singing and a bit of Harwich there as well.